You're only half alive until you risk it all. That's what we'll be exploring today. How you need to burn your bridges, have no safety nets, be willing to fly or die to create an extraordinary life, to create the life that you dream of, the life that means you have no limits, the life that means that you don't live with regret. You're only half alive until you have risked it all. Now, before I get into that, becoming superhuman, it is the extraordinary, unique, challenging program that I'm creating next year. I want to share a little something about why. You know, it's like, it still feels like the evolution of everything I've done so far. And for myself, thank you for the likes. But for myself, it was the death of my father 6 years ago, right? It was the tragedy of hearing, what was happening to him after I saw the light go out, to know that was it. There was nothing more I could do. That everything, all my promises, everything that I thought I could change were done. There was all those empty promises which I made time and time again were done. And it was after that I made the resolution to change forever, right? And then since then, I have changed in extraordinary ways and created a life that is extraordinary, that I love to live into every day. And people often say to me, wow, it's obvious the transformation that's occurred. People who knew me, people who've just met me, couldn't imagine how anxious and scared and how held back I used to be. And so it's through this, people are like, I'm an exception. And that's true, but I shouldn't be an exception, and I don't need to be. And so becoming superhuman is my way of creating something where if people go through the process, they don't need to go through a tragedy to change their life. They don't need to have, a shock to their system in that way. They willingly choose to create differently and go through a challenging experience by choice that changes them so deeply that they are able to create everything they want in life. So that's what becoming superhuman is. So if you want that for yourself, if you want to live a life that feels superhuman, where you get to say, do and be everything that you could possibly be, message me. Tell me, that sounds amazing, let me know more. Send me a message that does that and I will let you know. I will send those details through. So, you're only half alive until you risked it all. That's what we're diving into today. And it's something that's been emerging over the years. I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and what I've witnessed is, although you can do good work, and it's very important to do some groundwork, to create a foundation of resilience and kind of educating yourself that you can do things, right? It's very important to have that foundation. But if you don't at some point take big risks, if you don't at some point make leaps that are far beyond the realms of what you think you're capable, you are never going to create the life that you could. You're always going to be held back, always incremental shifts. It's just what I've seen. I've been trying over the years, obviously working with different people to try this. What if we just get them to do gradual work? And that creates gradual change, and it's okay. It's good. It's just not enough. Not when I know what's possible. And so it's like there has to be some big risks. So as a way of testing yourself, right? It's like to find out where you are on this spectrum. It's like when you walk into a room, do you say, do, and be everything you could, or do you leave anything back? That's how you get to test how far you are on this, how alive you are in the moment, actually. When you're truly alive in the moment, there's nothing you won't say, nothing you won't do, nothing you won't be in that moment or be willing to be seen as, because that's who you are. And that's what you can be. So someone was asking me the other day, actually, we were talking about how you engage with people. And it's actually someone I'm coaching, actually. She was like, someone was surprised at her experience and her expertise, and someone she'd known for quite some time, and it took her aback. And my answer to her was this: it's like, well, have you've been holding back in your conversations with him? So how would he possibly know what you're capable of or how extraordinary you are if you're not sharing that? If you're holding back in those conversations, how would he possibly know that? And so, of course, all he's going to go on is the experience that you've had together. Now, someone else, actually, I was coaching, she's in the job, there's a guy, actually, in the job he's in. He goes to meetings, and in these meetings, I was asking him how successful he is, what people think of him within these meetings. And so he said they like him being there, he's a valued asset. But I asked how he goes about those meetings. And his answer was this. It was, he's there and he's making notes and he's listening deeply and intently. What he tends to do is, he tends to go away, think deeply about everything that's been shared, and then he'll come back and he will say something, is what he'll do. So it'll be like by message later, it'll be a while after. So the problem with that, well, there's many problems with that, but one problem with that is, in the meeting, the person is essentially someone who's barely there. So their experience of him is a lack of presence, actually, is what their experience is. And so when it comes to the fact of like, right, who am I going to get? Because it's like a sales contract, right? It's like, so who am I going to get to sell for me? The person who's very quiet and doesn't speak up, that's the person who I trust to sell millions of pounds worth of our products. Unlikely, right? And the truth is that it's just fear getting in the way. Now, listening deeply, by the way, and actually coming back with something worth saying is useful. It's a very important skill. I recommend it. But it's important it's done in the meeting, because in the meeting is where the connection's happening. In the meeting is where the chance to create something is. And without doing that, you're leaving something of yourself out of it. And this person, he is not alive in that moment. He is withdrawn, he is half there. And that is going to be felt. That is the connection level cannot be created when that's happening. Now, a good example of an alternative way to do this was when I was in Mallorca actually working with a client, and one of the things I was doing was I was present for quite important meetings. And one of these meetings, it was kind of a Spanish translation as well. So there was a lot going on, and I didn't really understand a lot of the stuff they're talking about, because this business isn't my area of expertise. But what I am there for is to pay attention to how she interacts and what's going on, and to be able to offer anything that I feel is important is what my job is. So I'm there and I'm paying attention. And there was a couple of things during the meeting that I was talking about. Then something stood out, and I wasn't sure if they'd addressed it because of this translation problem. And so I just made a little note and I waited, and it got to the end. And I just asked a question of her. Actually, I said, have we dealt with this yet? And she said, no. So I said, okay. And then I made a very direct point. And the actual issue was a miscommunication through message. So she'd asked him to not to do something, and he'd gone ahead and done it. So it's very seemingly small. But what had happened, which it took a while to extract what had happened actually, because they were so busy trying to say that it wouldn't happen again, they didn't actually bother to connect to what the problem was. The problem was simply having multiple conversations by message about two different deals. And so while she was talking about one deal, he was talking about another deal. And so there was $100,000 difference in their communication, which was breaking down their connection, which was breaking down, obviously, the deal would look terrible because of the difference, but it made sense when you understood that the miscommunication that occurred. So bringing that up, raising that, not only did it was probably a bit stressful for them, a bit stressful for her initially, but what it did was it exposed a problem and helped them to realise they need to be much clearer in their communication, especially because of the language difference, and to never again make an assumption about what's going on. And for her, of course, she's learned how to be very clear about what she's talking about, and the way she communicates need to change. So that came very simply during that meeting, right at the end, listening deeply, but making sure that they don't go away without knowing what the problem is and creating a resolution. Because eye to eye, it's much easier to create a resolution than it is. But once you go away again, you get back to messages, it's much easier for confusion to happen. So when you're willing to be truly here, and you're willing to risk people not liking it, judgment and all these kind of things, suddenly you're able to create something. Now that one thing that I brought up there, not only would it save her money in that situation, but could potentially save her a lot of money in time to come. And more than that, a lot of stress saved from miscommunication that would have come up. So that was a very valuable thing, just came up by the fact of being present and being willing to say things that people don't like. Very simple, right? Be truly alive within the moment. So consider for yourself, actually. Consider when, like this week is a good one, right? When have you held back? When have you not said or done what you truly wanted to do? Because when you did that, it's like alive or dead, awake or asleep. You know, I like to binaries. It's very simple. It's a nice way to do that. When have you been alive in the conversation? And when have you been holding back? Just pay attention to that and choose to be alive. I strongly recommend it. Choose life. So when it comes to risk, you know, taking risks, Jim Carrey, he famously spoke about his father. Now, whatever you think of Jim Carrey, there's some good stuff that he shared. And he shared this about his father. His father was a comedian when he was a boy. I think when he was a young boy, his father was a comedian. But he made a choice to become an accountant because it was a safe career. Because he's always, you know, comedians are very, you know, can he provide for his family? He didn't know. So he thought, I'm going to get a safe job and my family will be taken care of. When he was in his 50s, this guy, he was made redundant, lost his job, and apparently it's quite a tough time for the family. And so the lesson that his father shared with him was, you can fail at what you don't love, so you might as well fail at what you do. Now, you may have seen this, right? You may have seen this bandied around, and people often talk about it, they'll share it, they'll get lots of likes and lots of comments on it, like, you know, it makes sense. But are you living through it? You know, are you really living through that purpose? Because the truth is, having a job gives you the illusion of safety. You know, it's very deceptive. You know, if you've got a nice job, you may have a nice company car, you may have a pension, good health insurance, it may be at a very reputable firm. And things may be going well, you get paid each month, it's awesome, you get bonuses, all that kind of stuff can be going on. At any point that's out of your control, they could choose to make your role redundant. They could choose to bring other people in and replace you if perhaps they think you're not doing good enough at your job. They can, the company itself might get embezzled and might go under, as we've happened with other companies, some quite big ones, right? Big banks have gone under, haven't they? So there's so many things that are out of your control that could be taken away from you if you allow yourself to be wrapped up in the illusory blanket of safety of working for someone else. The actual best protection you can ever have when it comes to being employed is to be self-employed, to actually develop the skill to be of service to someone and to have them pay you. Because it doesn't actually matter necessarily what the industry is. That skill, that ability, you can take to anything. So even if you had your own business and it failed, those skills will be applicable elsewhere. You know, you can use them anywhere. And what I've found is that through learning how to make money as a professional life coach, right, over the years, the skills I've had to learn, they have directly helped me to help clients in a wide variety of different industries. So it's not been specific to anything. Those skills are applicable elsewhere. And if you look at some of the top, like some of the multi-millionaires and billionaires who have lost money, I think Peter Jones is one of those guys. Again, it's not about what you think of the person, but think of what he's done. He's actually lost all his money, I think twice before, and rebuilt his financial and his business empire those times. That's only possible because the skills were applicable and usable again and again and again. So even when he crashed, he was able to learn and develop and do better. And this is self-employment really is the greatest protection you can have. It's hard work. It's damn hard work. It's a great leap to do it, but it's like it gives you that real safety of having the ability to create regardless of what's going on around you. Because then of course you can do it online and offline. So it's one of those examples of if you're willing to risk that much, the rewards are for the rest of your entire life. And of course who you need to become when you're self-employed is just it's hard to describe, what that is, but you are actually like walking the tightrope without a net, and you just have to. And it's a wonderful challenge to embark on if you're willing to do such a thing. So an example of the importance of risk was someone I was working with a few years ago now. Actually, I think it's 4 years ago. There was a guy. He worked for a corporation. And he was doing very successfully in London. So it's a good job, good money. However, he hated it. He said if he has to keep going in there, he doesn't know if life would be worth living. This was with the kinds of things he was saying. And then he said he's had these other things like music, I think music and magic and other things. He had a few other things that he really loved. And we were talking about the potential to go and do these things. And he said this to me. He said, Because actually, first off, during the session, it was right. Take some steps towards it was the thing. This was the incremental change, was what I had recommended for him initially. Again, this is the difference between incremental and taking a leap. So I recommended to do that. Checked in with him a couple of weeks later. He had not done it at all. His reply to me by email, this was oh, I just wish I didn't have so many passions, because I just don't know what to do. I've got so many passions, it's stopping me. And so now I disagreed with that assessment. And so what I said this to him, I said, by email this is, I said to him, okay, that's not what's going on. I'd like to tell you what I think is going on, and you're not going to like what I say. It's unlikely you're going to like what I say, but it'll be of service to you. Do you want me to tell you what I think? And so I left it there. It took a few days to get back. He probably read it for a bit and thought, I'm not sure about this. And then he replied back and said, okay, yes, please. So this is what I said, something like this. I said, you don't have too many passions. You're not passionate enough. If you said to me that you weren't sure if life was worth living at the place you're working at now, and yet you claim to have passions, passionate about any of these things, and yet you're not willing to take a risk for any of them. You're willing to continue going into a job you say you hate, one that makes you miserable, one you say you don't think life is worth living, rather than take a risk on one of your passions. I said, you're not passionate. I said, if you were passionate, you would take a risk on one. If you failed, guess what? You'd do something else. That's what you would do if you're truly passionate, because when you're passionate and you're living through that, you cannot allow yourself to live such a grey and empty life, as in your words, as you said to me before we had that first session. So I sent that to him, and it was tough. It was probably a lot longer than I've just said there, and I sent that to him. I left it with him. I didn't hear back from him for quite a while. It was a few weeks actually, and then I got this message back. So I wasn't sure, how it was received. Then I received this message back, and he said, "Look, thank you so much." He said, "That was the best message I've ever received in my entire life. I printed it off, I stuck it on my wall, and I've been reading it every day." And he said, "I just wanted to let you know that I've handed my notice in. I'm actually going to be leaving at the end of next month, and then I'm going to take a risk. And I know I could fail, but I'm willing to take the risk because it's just worth it. I don't want to live like this anymore. It's worth the risk." And so that was beautiful, and it's very cool. So it's one of those moments of just, the incremental stuff wasn't enough for him. He had a very full job, full busy life. His mind was overly busy. He was overly stressed. Taking the leap, though, that changed something within him. Me challenging him in that way brought to the surface, was it really what he wanted? Is it important enough? And it was, and he took the risk. And it really didn't matter what the outcome was. What matters is the risk. What matters is who he becomes through taking that risk. It's very cool. And so if you want to take a risk, you want to live a life where you can just take risks and you're going to be okay because you can just learn from it and grow and develop. If you really want to have a different experience of life, that's what Becoming Superhuman is all about next year. It is, last night in fact, I was talking to an environmental scientist. She's someone who's helping me create one of the experiences, because there's going to be 5 experiences, and she's creating one of them. You'll need a passport for this one. And so as we're creating this experience, she was asking me about what it was, what's the purpose of it. And so I was sharing with it, and I explained it in this way. It's like I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and some of those clients have just made incredible transformations, and they continue to. It's like something's changed so core within them that even though they may need to get more training, or they may need more skills, or whatever it may be, right? Because there's more things to learn and develop on. What they haven't done is gone and had the same fears. They have transcended that. So they are able, so it's not about how the fear is no longer a problem for them. They are creating what they want in life. It's just about skill development. And then there are loads of other people who is just, they've capped themselves on how far they're willing to grow, on which aspects of their life they're willing to challenge themselves in. And they set themselves up for problems later. When tragedy strikes, or when the natural things that happen in life, which may seem overwhelming, come up, suddenly they're not able to cope with that, and then they realise the problem with having capped themselves. And so for me, I'm like, I'm so sick of having people. Sick is the wrong word, but I'm like frustrated with people who could do so much more, capping themselves in that way. And so I've decided this is what Becoming Superhuman is, the conversations I'm having, it is the work I'm doing, and it's what this program is for. It's like, how can I create something that By going through it, by actually challenging yourself in each way, you become so different that there's nothing you can't handle and there's no dream you're not willing to go for. So it means that when you go into experience the natural tragedies in life that happen, you got it, you can handle it. And when it comes to going for any dream you want, you go for it. It doesn't matter if you fail. It doesn't matter what happens. You choose to be alive in the moment. And that's what this is all about. So if you want that, and you really want to create a very different experience of life, send me that message. Tell me if you think this sounds amazing and that you want to know more, and I'll do just that. So a life of risk, it doesn't even, after a while, it doesn't feel like risk in the same way anymore. Whereas, when you're used to keeping yourself safe, it can seem so big and so overwhelming. When you make it a way of being, you actually choose risk more than you would choose safety because it's more exciting, it's more fun, and things happen much faster. Life gets created much faster in that way. Like when you're willing to risk anything, so you're willing to say, be, and do anything in any moment, the spark of connection is extraordinary. The kinds of people you meet, the depth of connection that can happen, every part of your life can expand rapidly. And the thing is, you don't even know how much you're holding back or you're missing out on until you begin to experience life differently in this way. So a client a few years ago, we spent a day together because she'd held back from something for 30 years, something she had not expressed in all that time. And through the work we were doing, we realised it needed to be shared. It was like a huge thing for her, and it was the only way to move forward was to get this out first. So this is what came up, and we went to meet in the woods. Actually, we did a woods coaching session. During that time, she shared something with me that she hadn't shared in 30 years. A secret she'd had from a child, or something that had happened to her. And she just never told anyone. She was told not to as a child, and then as an adult, she kept that secret. And so she poured it out. It was a really beautiful connection that we had. It was incredible actually for her to share that with me, to be the first person to ever hear that. And then, so she, there was obviously a lot of emotion was released for her then. But my suggestion to her at the end was, well, it shouldn't stay with me. Now it's important that you create more freedom for yourself, and that is by who else could you share this with next? And so she created a list of people in order of who she wanted to share this with, to create more freedom for herself, to let go of this thing forever. So she doesn't have this weight being carried around with her anymore. And she did that. Day after day, over the weeks ahead, she started to share with different people. Now, I don't know at what point this happened, because it's hard to put these into specifics. However, at some point, she'd shared enough that she realised, and her words were, I realised that I'd been walking into every room as half a person until she'd begun sharing this, and then suddenly she's now whole again. All of herself can be brought to the moment. And it's so beautiful. And the truth is, when we carry secrets, so this isn't another way of risking, by the way, it's in relationships. It's being honest and sharing our deepest things that we're ashamed of, the things that we're scared of, our vulnerabilities. It's in relationships, it's taking those kind of big risks too. Because if you don't, when you're walking around and there are certain things you don't want people to know about you, you don't realise how much energy is going towards keeping those secrets. You don't know it. But language is so unconscious, and the way we speak and the things we share is so unconscious that when someone talks to us, we will naturally share things about ourselves. We will, we'll go through our past life into our future, into anything that we have access to, and it will come out in the moment, right? That's just a natural thing that occurs. When you've got secrets, things you aren't willing to share, it doesn't happen in the same way. It will go through a filter where your brain will have to decide what's okay and what isn't okay. And then it will speak through those terms. Now, obviously, over time, it just gets used to doing that. So it can do it pretty quickly. But there is still a barrier between you and what you're sharing with people. And subconsciously, you're communicating that. So subconsciously, you're burning energy because you're wasting a lot of energy protecting that secret. And you're also subconsciously communicating there's something missing in your connection with someone. They won't necessarily be able to be aware of what that is. There'll just be a little weirdness, especially when you talk about certain topics that might naturally emerge that conversation. If it doesn't happen, that's there. And that's going to affect who you are in that moment. That's going to stop, that's going to reduce what you say, that's going to change what you do, and that is going to hold you back from being all you could be. That is, you will not be able to be fully alive in the moment if you're carrying secrets that you're not willing to get out. Now, it's not about, as I was sharing with someone the other day, it's not about sharing everything all the time with everyone. It's not about that, but it's about being willing to. It's about being willing to share everything and to take the risk and to be vulnerable. Because when you walk into a room and you can look someone in the eye and there's nothing that you're not willing to talk about yourself, about life, about anything. So that, the spark of connection, what you can create together, you're truly alive. And when you're alive, you see the other people who are alive in the moment too. And you see when they're checked out and people aren't around. It's a very different kind of experience of life that is. And it's not easy. It's obviously, by most of us, by the time we get to adulthood, have built up a lot of this stuff. So it makes sense as to why we hold back and protect ourselves. A lot of the time, we protected ourselves when we were younger because it helped us to do that. As adults, though, and as people who want to create better lives, there's more for you, far more. And you cannot know what that is unless you take those risks. So coming back to the title itself, it's like, until you take big risks, and that could be in the words you say, it could be in the actions you take. Until you take massive risks, you don't get to be fully alive, because that's your nature. Your willingness to make giant leaps in your life is there. You can see it in children, actually, how quickly they go from essentially not being able to barely communicate to running around and being able to even swear in the right part of a sentence. They do that because there's nothing in the way. There's nothing in the way of their learning. They're adapting. They can connect easily with other kids. That's what we're born with. And as we grow up, we learn there are problems and constraints, and we reduce all of those things, and it reduces who we are. And the truth is, most of us don't even know who we are. Because who we are, we get to find out through what we say and what we do, and how people respond and how we respond to that. It's an ongoing conversation that emerges and changes continuously. So unless you're risking, and you're risking vulnerability, and you're risking criticism and judgment, that's not going to happen. And the truth is, you're being judged and criticised anyway. It's just what's going to happen. So you might as well be judged and criticised for the truth than for the lie, is what I'd recommend. So is this resonating with you? Does this make sense to your life? And it's a lot of questions, right? But can you consider where in your life you're holding back from taking risks? And as we come up to the new year, a lot of people, they make resolutions, or you either have people who make resolutions, or people go, no, resolutions don't work. And everything works if you do it. It's a very simple thing, but it's quite a nice, coming to the end of a year is a great way to reflect on how you're being, the life you're leading, and just to look ahead and decide, how do you want your life to be? You should never don't live a life of regret. I remember Bronnie Ware, who I met at my friend's event a couple of years ago, at the Wellbeing Now experience, where she was sharing how, through her experiences of working in palliative care, like people who were dying, and then she wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, and it was not being true to themselves and doing too much what others expected of me. It was one of them. And there are a few different regrets there. It's like you shouldn't die having any regrets. And the way you live your life without regrets is by being alive moment by moment, by saying and doing what feels right to you, and just living a life that feels fucking amazing. And that's available to you and to every one of us, by the nature of existence. So that's it. That's my gauntlet laid down for you, to change the way you're communicating, to change the way you're interacting, to seek opportunities to take big risks so you get to create an extraordinary life. That is for you. And if you want my support in doing that, if you think that you want to become superhuman and go through an incredible training process that will make that possible, maybe becoming superhuman is for you next year, When someone asked me about it the other day, they were talking about like, what's an example? Like if you were to go through it, like what would be an example of becoming superhuman? So this person's a coach who also has a full-time job. So I said to her this, I said, the example for you would be, if you'd gone through the program, at the end of the program, you could quit that job and you could focus and do all the work necessary to make it successful. You would take all the risks required, you would do all the work you needed to, so that that's a coaching business that is a dream of yours that looks distant in the future would happen in months. That's what you get to do becoming superhuman. Things that may seem years away take months. And why do they take such a short period of time? Because you're willing to risk, you're willing to have conversations, you're willing to do things that scare the crap out of other people. I'm trying to swear less. Superhuman means being everything, bringing all of yourself to the moment for relationships, for friendships, for work, for everything you want in life. Becoming superhuman is a different way of living, and that is possible for you. And if that sounds good to you, send me a message, tell me that sounds fucking cool, and send me the details, and I'll do just that. Thank you for being here. Any comments or questions, please leave them. I'll come back to them, and I look forward to seeing you on the next edition of Becoming Superhuman. Thank you.